best morning. So day 5 of the 29-day challenge. So today's day is called 120,000 below Mount Everest. It tells a story about a guy who tries to one up everybody else, and basically he wants to be the man at the office, and that means having the nicest car, having the best house, just kind of having the best of everything. And so he ends up $120,000 in credit card debt. His wife doesn't even know about it, and they end up losing their house. So she goes through kind of like shock, and she's mortified. But then she, stays with him, and they work together. And over the course of the next 4 years, they stick to their habits and they pay everything off, and they're out of debt. So he essentially, talks about knowing versus doing. So you know what you're supposed to do, and then the question is, are we doing what we know we're supposed to do, or are we doing something else? And that's the question. And so I call it, instead of one-upping, there's one-upping, but then there's also keeping up with the Joneses. Make sure that you can afford it. And that's the knowing versus doing. And so our objective for today, compare ourselves to everyone else. But he's counterintuitively kind of telling you, compare yourself to everyone, do it for 24 hours, and then you'll realize that how shallow and ineffective it is, and you'll get so sick of it, you'll realize you should never do it again. Today's blueprint action plan is, now next to each set of teeth, he wants us to write down a point of comparison that we regularly turn to over the course of the day. And write down something that you admire and you're proud of in someone that you love. And make a commitment to pivot these admirable thoughts each time you find yourself falling into particularly unhealthy comparison traps. And you'll be amazed at how quickly you can train your brain. So my 3 things that I wrote down that I constantly compare myself to other people, and I'm guilty of it, is I think about my house, and other people have bigger houses, or they own a house, and I don't own a house, I rent. And I like my house, and it's nice, and my kids are good, and we have a really good life. But I think about owning a home and the fact that I don't, and that's something I compare myself to others. Now, the second thing that I constantly compare myself to others is how much free time I don't have, or I do have, versus how much free time I'd love to have. Now, I look at other people who have time to be out and about during the day, and just not having to be at work and be having freedom. And that is something that I constantly compare myself to others. And the last is body shape. So I'm constantly thinking about, and this is since I've been young, but I've been self-conscious about the way I look. And so you would think that I would work harder and be more serious about it, but it's something that I've always struggled with. And so those are the 3 things that I compare myself to others about. There's 3 people that I admire, and there's 3 things about them, one about each person that I admire. So when it comes to the house, I thought about my mother and how hard she worked, her work ethic in her own business and at home. She did everything very consistently every week. She had certain days that she did certain things, and she would save, and she would be frugal. She didn't have much, but she was able to save up and buy a home eventually, buy her own house. And so that is very inspiring, and I admire that about her. Next is, when it comes to free time, I think about my stepbrother and the fact that he's never had a job except for when he's been a teenager. He's always had his own business. He's always had something that he is doing, and that allows him to have a lot of free time and ability to do things with his kids, vacations, just he has a lot of free time and ability to do things because of his business acumen, and I admire that about him, about his hustle, his drive. Um, so that's something that I think about and I admire. So the last thing is body shape. And my father was in no means a bodybuilder or in great shape, but he was in particularly good shape his whole life. I remember in his 40s, he was juicing, so he not steroids. He did fresh juices. He had a juice maker, and he would do all. That's him, by the way, in the background. R.I.P. He died a couple of years ago. He was 65. So he juiced. He drank juices that he made himself. He put all sorts of vegetables and fruits in there, and then he would walk the boardwalk. He would literally walk like 3 or 4, 5, 7 miles. He would go usually take a dip in the water, and he would do this even in January and February. He was not an official member of the Polar Bear Club, but he did swim in the ocean. I remember he would go in, dip in for a couple of minutes, come out, throw his clothes back on, and we would go back upstairs to his apartment. And I thought he was insane. We got back to his place. He would drink raw eggs. His health and his diet habits were really inspiring, and I admire him for that.